Hello and welcome to an exclusive hour-long programme with me, Alex Belfield, talking to one of the most prolific songwriters of his generation, Mike Batt. How are you?
Hello, Alex. That sounds very important.
Well, he does really, because you're one of those people that not everybody might know your name, but they certainly will know your songs. Of late, we've seen you on the TV with all the adverts and doing all the interviews. Firstly, are you comfortable being here, being you, or would you rather be playing your records?
Oh, I just like doing everything I do, really, but it's nice to be me. I don't mind being me. There are times when I hate myself, like everybody else, when you wake up after a skinful of drink or you've done something, eaten too much, and you've got to lose some weight. But, I mean, generally speaking, I don't mind being me.
Presumably you were always musical, because to have the ability to write in the way you do, you must have had an interest at a very early age. Well,
funnily enough, I don't think I did when I was 5, 6 or 7. I think it was about 10 or 11 when I got really interested. I suppose I was always musical, because you don't, if you can play football, you probably always could, but you maybe don't find out until you're 12, I don't know. But in my case, I came to it quite late. My dad got an old piano in a junk shop, and I started tinkling on it, and I taught myself to play the piano. And really, that's where it all came from. So it must have been lurking there earlier.
We've got a bit in common, actually, because we're both ginger. It's always good to find a friend.
Absolutely, yeah.
Has your life been a life of abuse like mine has?
No, I've never had it to be a problem. In fact, you got old ladies saying, "Oh, I wish I had hair like that."
Yeah, always the women do, but the guys never do they? I think they've realised that it's probably not a great thing.
I don't know. I've never realised it was a problem to be ginger until later on in life, like looking back now, when I hear everyone saying, "Oh, isn't it terrible being ginger?" And I mustn't have had the same experiences that you. I did get called Ginge at school, yeah, but I don't mind that.
Been a life of torture for me. Let's not psychoanalyse me anyway. We haven't got time for that. And also, I love the piano as well, and it's one of the greatest releases for me. When anything goes wrong in my life, the first thing I always turn to is the piano.
I must say, I always thought when I first started playing the piano that it was really for impressing women, impressing girls, and it does, so that proved itself to be true, because I didn't have much else to impress them with. But to be serious about it, no, it really is a wonderful thing to be able to sit down and play the piano, and I say that without any kind of arrogance. I hope. All I mean is that I hear so many people who say they wish they could do it that I think, well, actually that's rather good then, because I can, and I wish I could. Play football. I mentioned it already, and I can't catch a ball. I was no good at cricket, but I can play the piano, so we all have different skills.
And what about the fact that in the old days everybody seemed to have a piano in their front room? Now there aren't the pianos there, and therefore there aren't the amount of people playing. There's something depressing about that, isn't there?
Well, yeah, you could call it depressing, or you could say it's just moving on. I mean, yes, it's nice. It would be nice if people all sort of ran out and bought the sheet music as they used to have to do in the old days, because there was nothing else to do. And then radio came along, and they could sit and listen to that, so they did. And then records came along, so they could even listen to them. That was effortless, and now we've got the web. But I think what it's done is it's meant that there are fewer terrible piano players around. In the old days, almost everyone played, and probably quite badly. And now those who really want to are the ones who really do, and those who don't, they're quite happy playing video games.
Do you think you're an extraordinary piano player? What is your greatest gift? Is it the writing, the singing, or the playing?
Well, I mean, if you ask somebody, do you think you're an extraordinary piano player, and they'll answer yes, and it would sound a bit arrogant. But I have to say, I do think I have a feel for particularly blues. I'm quite a heavy piano player. I learned in pubs, basically, and I found out I had a good ear, because if you've only got to, I mean, when I was 14, it was the only way to get into the pub without getting slung out. And I used to have a row of 7 pints, along the top of the piano. Friday and Saturday night, I was the richest kid in school, £2 a night. £4 pocket money a year a week rather, in 1968 or whatever, 67, 66, whatever it was. But I think the best way to learn the piano is that way. For me, it was. There were two different kinds of piano player. The ones that learn, from lessons, and that's a great way to learn. And the other way is to learn by ear. And to have a drunk hanging off you trying to sing, "I'd like to get you on a slow boat to China" in somewhere between F sharp and G, in 3 different tempos at the same time. I mean, that is the best way to learn, really. For me, it was anyway.
And at what point did you realise that this could be something that you could actually make a living out of, opposed to it just being a bit of fun in a pub?
Well, I mean, I used to play with a band when I was 15. I had a little chord organ that my dad got me in Woolworths, where you played like the left hand was just buttons for chords, and it had a little bellows that you plugged into the electric supply. And then later on I upgraded it to a Watkins Telstar organ, which was the junior sort of poor man's version of the Vox Continental, which for any musos out there, I'm sure you know, it was the one that Alan Price played in The Animals, and that's the one I really wanted. But we couldn't afford that, so we had the Watkins Telstar, which was pretty good anyway. And it was I was about 15 or 16, I thought, this is pretty good, but we didn't really get very many bookings as a band, and I was still at school. It was when I left school at 18 that I realised I didn't want to go into the army, which I had wanted to go into. I decided I wanted to be a songwriter, so I thought, okay, I'll be a songwriter.
What comes first? You just having fun on the piano and then putting it on the score, or how did that manifest?
Well, to start with, it was kind of, I want to be a songwriter, so I'll sit at the piano until a song comes. And in those days, it was about 1968. Beatles, it was all psychedelic, and everyone was writing. Roy Wood was coming to the front with his, The Move and all that. And all the lyrics of everything, Whiter Shade of Pale, it was all quite psychedelic. So I was writing songs with titles like The Man with the Purple Hand, and you think up the title first and then write some reason for why this was the case. But I wasn't writing great stuff at all at that time, but I had something, obviously, because when I used to go and see A&R men at this talent scouts at record companies, they always used to say, look, this isn't the song for us, but do come back. And they don't say that unless they mean it, because they haven't got time. And so, I felt that there was some sort of development. I do find that a deadline is a bit like being a journalist. If you've got a deadline, you tend to write, I think, better stuff because you've got less time. So the adrenaline comes in, and sometimes I've stayed up all night. I can't tell you how many nights of my life in the old days I used to smoke a packet of fags and cups of coffee every half hour to keep me awake, then straight to the session the next day. I find the deadline a really exhilarating thing, and I've done my best work under the toughest deadlines.
I was listening to an interview with Elton John a few months ago, and he said he wrote his last musical in 32 minutes. I think the musical closed in 32 minutes as well, as it happens. It does seem as if it's hit and miss. Certainly when you look at Elton's previous work and you look at his stuff from the 70s and the 80s, is that because we've changed, or has he changed?
Elton's lucky, you see, because he's got a lyricist. All he gets and I say this with the best intentions, and if you're listening, Elton, I'll still love you. But I'm just saying you're very lucky because you get Bernie's lyrics or whoever's his lyrics, and you set them to music. Now, that's fine. That is such a wonderful thing to have. Someone else has already created the idea of the song, and all you have to do is put the music to it. But he's so brilliant at doing it, and that's what makes him a songwriter as opposed to just a tunesmith, because he's got this rapport with his lyricist, and the same with Tim Rice. Tim Rice will send him a finished lyric when he's working on, say, something like The Lion King, and I always envy people who only do one or the other, but I also relish the fact that I have to write lyrics, and I don't have to, but I prefer to write my own lyrics and tunes, because if I want to change a syllable of the tune, or let's say a syllable of a lyric to fit the tune, I can just change the word without ringing up the lyricist and saying, is it okay if I put another beat there? And that's why I sometimes write songs with rather odd time signatures, because I might just have decided to do that. There's no discussive process, you just do it. And the downside to writing on your own is, of course, it's not such a sociable thing. You can't sit together and have a cup of coffee and go down the pub and think of ideas. You just have to get it together.
And also writing by yourself, you don't have to send 50% of the paycheck off to someone else, which is always nice.
Well, that's true, but I mean, to be honest with you, that's a secondary thought. I mean, yes, I suppose you're right. I mean, there is that, but it's never really been the thought that I've had. I did try and write with Andrew Lloyd Webber for a while. In fact, I think I'm the only person that's written. I know I'm the only person that's written music for lyrics for Andrew, and music with Tim's lyrics, Tim Rice's lyrics. I found I got on great with Tim, but working with Andrew, even though he's a brilliant writer, and probably because he's a brilliant writer, there's I don't know, I think you're working for Andrew when you work with him, whereas because he's always the boss, it's his show and it's his thing, and you're the lyricist. Therefore, you're sort of one rung down. And quite honestly, I see songwriting as an absolutely equal thing. And so, from a political point of view, it's much better to just write with myself. If I want to have an argument with myself, I can do it any time I like. And the great thing about it is I always win.
Exactly. You've got this new album out called The Songwriter's Tale. I'm going to ask you some ridiculous questions, but they're there for a reason. Which one of these would you enjoy playing now if there was a piano in front of you?
Oh, let's have a look at the back of the album. I don't know. I suppose I'd try and pick one that I know the lyrics of without having to, because I'm really bad at knowing lyrics. And lately I've been on some gigs, so I've remembered them. So Winter's Tale, perhaps. Bright Eyes. Probably the hits, because I know the lyrics more easily. But there's a song here called I Watch You Sleeping, which is not a big hit. I've never released it, in fact, before. I wrote it 20 years ago when my son, Luke, was in an incubator 2 months early. Being born 2 months early, and he looked so vulnerable that I wrote this song called I Watch You Sleeping, which it kind of just tumbled out of me. And that's the sort of song that if I was with friends who knew all my hits and had heard them all before, yawn, I'd pull out this one and say, what do you think of this?
I Watch You Sleeping by Mike Batt here on your favourite local radio station. It's Alex Belfield back with one of those people who's fascinating to talk to because he's really written the soundtrack to our lives. For example, at Christmas, A Winter Tale is one of those songs we all look forward to. Do you know that a song's going to be that successful when you write it, or is there an element of luck or some serendipity that makes it a big hit?
I think the answer's that both of those are true. Not with every song. I think sometimes you write a song and you think, yeah, I like that song, that'd be a good album track, and you record it as an album track, because if you make an album that's full of potential hits, it can be a really bad experience listening all the way through, because they're all the same, they're all sort of up tempo or whatever, and an album that is an entity has highs and lows, and some songs are just good to be there because you can express something in them and they're good for what they are, but they're not going to be hits because they're not radio friendly or whatever, but they might be even better songs, but they're not perhaps hits. With Bright Eyes, I just thought, wow, if I get the right artist, it's going on a major movie. This is a massive record. And yet, that came out, I did it in 1976. I recorded it with Garfunkel in 76. It didn't get on the movie. Well, it was chucked off the movie 4 times. So that was the end of that. No hit, right? Then it was put back into the movie, thankfully 4 and not only 3 times. It happened to be in the movie when it went out. The record company dropped it because it couldn't get any radio play on it. Seriously, no one wanted to play it. And eventually I did get Radio 2 to play it after the record company had dropped it. I got on a couple of televisions. We couldn't get Garfunkel to promote it, so we used a little clip from the film, which people probably remember. And so that was another thing that happened that was just down to pure effort rather than... And then eventually it just sort of burst into flames, and we were selling 60,000 records a day, and it became number 1 in 10 countries. So whereas it was one of those where we thought, yeah, this is a cert, if as it did happen, some of those links of the chain on the way were broken and I had to mend them. If that hadn't happened, it would have never been a hit. So you can write what you think's a hit, and necessarily it doesn't always happen. Did you feel with the song Bright Eyes that you'd got something that was special and unique and that would touch people? Well, my sort of gauge, which I've really learnt over the years as to whether I've written something that will touch people, is if it rebounds on me as I'm writing it. And I'll sometimes do that. I remember it when I was writing The Closest Thing to Crazy, which is another track on this album, my version of it. Where I would be halfway through playing it and I'd kind of fill up, I know that sounds a bit sort of unmanly to say that, although I know everyone out there say, of course it's not. Particularly the women say it's not. But, if I think it's rather like the old rule of what you put out is what you get back. If you write something which is from the heart and which actually means something to you, or you're feeling it powerfully because of a particular person you're writing it about, or you have, even if it's a commission from a director of a film and you're writing a song, and so you're really fictitiously writing an emotional situation, you might have empathy with the character you're writing it for. It can still give you that emotional feeling where sometimes you can't even carry on singing it because it's affected you. if I'm affected by the song, then I find that other people are affected by it.
Sorry,
I usually find that other people are affected.
And let's talk about the emotion within you. Can a song be great and emotional for other people if you're not feeling it and you're just writing it as a song? Does there always have to be a story behind a great song to make it touch people as well?
I think if you're trying to touch people, you can. Rather like a painter or a filmmaker, you can fictitiously create a song. Sometimes I even pretend I've been briefed. There's a song on this album which I wrote for the Hollies, is my version of the song, and it's called Soldier's Song. And I pretended, because the Hollies rang me up and said, would you do 3 songs for us? Another fantastic experience. I'd love to do that. And I thought, what shall I write them about? And I thought, well, I know what I'll do. I'll pretend I've been commissioned to write a song for a big movie about this young lad who's gone off to join the Dragoon Guards, and he's off to his first battle, and what happens to him on the way. And I made up this whole film story of what happens, and I wrote this as a potential film song for a non-existent film, and it gave me the feeling of writing the song. But I still drew upon my own emotions about what I would have felt like if I'd been that young guy with that experience. And so you almost become like an actor when you're writing a song, because you have to inhabit the character that you're writing about.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about the people you've worked with and also the people you've created. You're the man behind Katie Melua, who is one of the biggest female sensations around the world right now. We'll take Bright Eyes now. It is one of those songs that seems to be played all over. It can be played at weddings and it can be played at funerals. That's bizarre, isn't it?
I never thought of it as a wedding song because it is about death. It's about where do you go when you die. So, but I suppose it's got a poignancy that if people play it at their wedding, is perhaps because they just like the song. It's the sort of song where you can listen to it and not know that it's about, oh my God, what happens when you die. It was actually commissioned by a director for the film Watership Down, and I didn't know that he obviously was preoccupied with the thought of death, because he was due to go in for heart surgery just after we recorded it, and in fact, sadly, he died on the operating table. So he spared me from telling me that. He didn't tell me he was due for that, and I wrote the song completely for the movie, and yet using my own emotions to describe and my own wonderment about what happens after you die. But he was obviously very curious because he was in that situation, and it was rather sad. Well, it was terrible. It wasn't just rather sad, it was awful. But I did get lots of letters after that record came out, and I got letters from people who had lost people, and they said it had given them great comfort. And so it brought home to me what responsibility you have as a songwriter, because you do affect people, you affect people's emotions. Sometimes you even affect people's lives, literally.
One of the world's most famous songs, Bright Eyes. We're here with its creator, Mike Batt. What I notice about playing that song in the past is it's pretty simple. It seems to me all the greatest songs are actually really simple, and that's not easy because there aren't that many notes to choose from, are there?
No, it's like that one about Mozart where the king says there's too many notes, and Mozart says, would you like to, perhaps Your Majesty would tell me which ones I should take out. Yeah, there aren't that many notes, and yet somehow we managed to come up with original material. Sometimes we accidentally write something that's existed already. I remember once when I was young, I used to make my living after I left working for a record company as an A&R man. I used to make my living writing jingles and doing arrangements for people, doing string arrangements for rock and roll bands or whatever. But one of the things I did was write a commercial for, I think it was Tennant's Lager, and I went off and did the demo for it, and I came back, played it to my wife. She said, you do realise you've just rewritten Waltzing Matilda, don't you? And when you looked at it that way, I thought, oh, damn, yeah, I have, actually. I hadn't realised that. And the biggest fear you have as a songwriter is that you might have copied, even yourself, even if you copied an earlier song of your own. It can be a tragedy because you think, well, damn, what am I going to do about that? Sometimes you can just change a couple of notes and it just becomes something else. Bright Eyes on the radio was almost impossible when we first started in 1979. I suppose, a record company, if they realise they had success with something similar the time before, they're going to go for something similar the next time. So I suppose it's obvious that will happen. But yes, it's a pity, and it would be nice to be able to be completely creatively free on every record.
It is interesting what you say about airplay and radio stations today. I know Katy just toured with Il Divo in America. Il Divo will never be heard on the radio as far as I can see. There isn't a radio station that I'm aware of that would play Il Divo. Even Classic FM probably wouldn't even play Il Divo because they turn their nose up at it.
Yeah.
Yet they're one of the world's most successful bands right now. Andrea Bocelli's sold 60 million. He'll never be played on the radio. There are just a few people who seem to penetrate that and find their audience. Josh Groban is a good example of a guy who sells millions and millions of records. You'll never hear him. From your position as a writer, are you writing then to write, or are you writing to be heard? Because without being heard, you're not going to sell anything, are you? It's difficult.
No, you have to keep both in mind. I mean, you have to think what you're really aiming at is people. And I'm a person, so I aim at myself. And anything after that, when I say aim at myself, I don't mean I'm just writing it for my own sort of self-indulgent good. All I mean to say is, as I said before, if a song affects me, it's going to affect other people. Well, of course, I still have to think when I'm producing that record, is this going to be wanting to be heard by people? Not just. You can often make a record which the public would love, but you've a feeling that radio producers won't love, and you've got to jump over that wall somehow to get to the people, and it doesn't always happen. I've several times written records which I just know that people would like, and people have liked when they've heard it, but getting it to them has been difficult. Again, I go right back to Bright Eyes, which was the one where Radio 1 actually told us we ought to arrange the words, one of them beginning with O and one of them beginning with F, in a well-known phrase or saying, and we did. We went to Radio 2 instead, and they helped us, and that's how we broke the record. But I mean, it was all to do with tempo and preconceptions, I suppose. It wasn't the coolest thing, perhaps, or maybe I wasn't the coolest person at that time, or whatever. I'm still not the coolest person. I never have been, probably never will be.
I think also your problem with radio, commercial radio these days, is it's being run by 18-year-old spotty trainer-wearing people that probably wouldn't even be aware of your existence. So to try and explain to them that you're a good writer, a good artist or a good performer would be pointless.
Yes, or by older people who wish they were 18-year-old and spotty and therefore act 18-year-old and spotty.
On that note, let's take another song from the album. I tell you one I like is the Caravan Song. It's very different to everything else on the album. Was that intentional when you write something like that? Did you try and make it different to everything else?
Not really. The Caravan Song was written for the film Caravans, which was James Michener's novel. They made a fantastically spectacular film, which was sadly rather lacking in the drama department. They got the plot completely wrong. They left out one of the main characters for a start. But it looked absolutely beautiful, and it was an epic, high-budget movie. And at the age of 27, I was absolutely delighted to be invited to score it. And it was written for, the girl in the film was going off trying to get away from everything. And she wrote, she felt she just wanted to get away from, I think she lived in Pennsylvania. She went off and she fell in love with a guy in Afghanistan. Went off with a camel train, caravan. And I put into the song this line, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going. And I didn't know, but years later I looked back and I realised I was writing quite a lot of songs saying things like that, even though I was writing it on behalf of a character. I'd also written a song called Run Like the Wind, which Roger Chapman sang. One day soon I'm going to run like the wind. One day soon I'm going to break away from everything. And I did. I soon did do that. It was the end of my first marriage, and I went away on a boat for 2 years. And so you look back at a song like that and you realise that even though you're doing it at the behest of a director of a film or something like that, you're still writing your own life story.
That's Caravan by Mike Batt. It's Alex Belfield here for an exclusive hour-long programme with a man who's created 1 million songs. Are there any songs that you've got in your archive that you know would be a big hit, that you would love to be a big hit, but nobody seems interested in other than you?
Yes, I do have a drawer full of little songs I hope to pull out one day and use, or which have been on albums of mine, solo albums. For example, The Closest Thing to Crazy was on a solo album of mine, which was I don't think Sony even released it in this country. I made it for Sony in Germany. And I was signed to Epic at that time in Germany. I'd made 6 solo albums for Sony in the UK. But because of the Wombles, of course, I was always thought of as, well, a Womble. So you don't easily jump onto programs like the Old Grey Whistle Test when you've been a Womble. And so in this country, people don't really think of me as a singer. Whereas in other countries, I had a lot of success as a singer-songwriter. And so with Closest Thing to Crazy, it was one of those songs that I had written on an album, which wasn't even released in this country because Sony weren't that interested in it. And it lay there until I met Katie Melua 10 years later. And she said, "Oh, I love this song on your old album." And I said, "Well, nah, that's too slow for you. You don't need to record. You wouldn't like that." She said, "Oh, no, let me hear it," because she only was listening to reading the lyrics off the back of the album, the booklet. And so she heard it and she said, "Oh, I'd really like to record this." So we did, and of course it was the big hit for her.
And it still is, isn't it, really?
Yes, although I think actually, funny enough, 9 Million Bicycles was a bigger hit internationally. It's the one that when she goes, she's just touring now. I just came back from France where her new tour just went up like a rocket. I mean, 3 standing ovations. It was just fantastic. And when the opening of 9 Million Bicycles comes on, there's like roar of applause. It's the same with Closest Thing to Crazy, but I actually think, funny enough, Bikes, as we call it, is a bigger record.
And we tend to think of Sofas now when we hear the other one.
Yeah, well, that was a bit, from a marketing point of view, we had to live that one down a bit because DFS loved it so much. They actually wanted to renew it, and I just had to say no because no animosity to them. I mean, it was so nice of the guys to want to use the song, but we'd already become the song, to buy sofas to, and I think that's worn off a bit now. I think people have. Now that you've reminded them, of course, they'll know for another 2 years. But so thanks for that.
Sorry about that. I mean, I love Katie. I think she's fantastic. She's not only gorgeous and adorable. By the way, I did ask her out on a date and she said, no, I was too ugly, which is very insulting.
She did not say that.
Well, more or less. I could tell in her eyes.
That's not what she told me.
And she's just got one of those unique voices, and that's what I think you need in this business. There's 1 million pretty girls who want to be pop stars, but you've got to have more than that. And to survive internationally, you really do have to have something unique. Did you know the minute you met her that she'd got something very special?
No, I didn't, because when I first met Katie, she walked in, she was scruffy, she had an old pair of jeans on and she had her hair up and she had no makeup. Not that made that much difference. You could still tell she was a pretty girl, but she was clutching a guitar that she'd only just learnt to play 2 weeks before. But she sat down and she played a song which she had written about Eva Cassidy called Faraway Voice. And that was strange because she'd written it in D flat, which was the key below the natural key of E, which is the guitar key. And the only reason for that was that one of the machine heads on the guitar wasn't working properly, so it had fallen out of tune. So she had to tune it down to D flat. And so from now on, she plays it in D flat because that's the best key for it. Anyway, getting on back to the point, she sang well, and I thought, well, yeah, there's something there. Very, very. I wrote down, I remember writing my little notes as I was hearing the people I was listening to. Small girl, very good voice, see you again, or something like that. So the next day she came in with her mum and played me some more stuff, and I started to think, yeah, this is something good here. And then we went and did some sessions with piano and vocal, and there was just one moment where I asked her to ad-lib over one of the songs that we were working on. And when she delivered this line, it was just such a fantastic, brilliant, intelligent way of singing, but totally unrehearsed and just part of her. Didn't sound like... It was an ad-lib. It didn't sound like Aretha Franklin or Dusty Springfield or anybody. It wasn't a copy It wasn't an X Factor twiddle that they all learn. I'm not knocking X Factor, but they often are singing the same cliches. It was just something that was coming straight out of Katy that was Katy, and it was on that occasion that I knew I was working with someone who would one day be one of the greats.
How does it feel to create something and somebody who has ended up more famous than you as an individual? Is that a great compliment to you, or do you think, God, that could have been me?
I never get envious when I hear someone sing my songs. I mean, I never was envious of Garfunkel. I was delighted to be, working with one of my heroes. I mean, Simon and Garfunkel, I grew up to them. The idea of working with Garfunkel, the man who sang Bridge Over Troubled Water, never a hint of envy. I've never been envious of David Essex or Cliff Richard or the Hollies or Katy. There have been times, I suppose, when I've been with Katy as her manager on the road, and they'll rush straight past me for her autograph, and I think, the kid's bigger than me now. And that happened quite early on. I mean, because I've never been that big as an artist. I mean, again, largely because of the Wombles. In different countries, yeah. For example, when we're in Germany, they'll come up to us both together and there'll be a queue for me to sign an autograph, and she'll be standing next to me with another queue for her autograph. But her queue is definitely getting longer than mine these days. And I have absolutely no resentment. I'm so delighted for her. I mean, I've had a great life, ups and downs and ins and outs, but she's got a whole life ahead of her, and it's just fantastic.
And going back to the Wombles, it seems interesting hearing you talk about it because it's probably a cash cow. It was hugely successful. Everybody knows the song. It did seem to taint you as you, because as you say, then people thought of you as the Wombles man, which wasn't really you. That was just something you'd created.
Yeah.
How are you viewing it now? Do you wish you'd have done it or not?
Well, who knows what would have happened if I hadn't written the Wombles song. I mean, I might never have emerged, or I might have emerged in the genre that I started in, which was much, much more serious rock, writing the strings for the band called Family, their first album and all that sort of thing. I had a solo artist career. Suddenly along came the Wombles. My sense of humour got the better of me. And you say the song, but in fact there were 8 hits. There was Wombly Merry Christmas, there was Minuetto Allegretto, I'm proud of them. The fact that I'm even listing them now means I was learning as an arranger. I was learning all the styles. I was doing Minuetto Allegretto was a Mozart piece, based on a Mozart piece. So I was having great fun as a conductor, arranger, producer, singer, because I sang all the Wombles things, all the harmonies, everything. My mum made all the costumes. I had a great time. But after it finished, and it was only 18 months or 2 years perhaps, of my 40-year career, in England I was tainted with that sort of, you act the clown, well, we'll treat you like one. It's really the old thing about like the clown wanting to play Shakespeare. And the clown probably can play Shakespeare, but it's too late because they know him as a clown in this country. But then later, I think as I've got a bit older, and some of the public have followed what I've done, and they do. That's why it's nice to do this album as a completely clear, clean album of my own songs sung by me, even though they were made famous by other people. And some of them are hits which I had in pretty much every other country of the world, but they've never even been heard of in England because they wouldn't ever get radio play because they were Mr. Womble singing them instead of whoever I was in the different country. Was there no room for a Wombles track on this CD? I think if I'd put a Wombles track on this CD, it would have been puzzling for people overseas because they never heard of the Wombles. That's why I say that's why I had a serious career overseas, because they didn't know who the Wombles were. So if I'd put a Womble record on, they would have gone, "What's all that? I've never heard of the Wombles." Like if we're in they've heard of the Wombles in New Zealand because of the TV show, but not as me as the person to do with the music, or America or wherever it might be. Whereas, so it would have been, as this is an international release, it would have been weird to have put a Womble record on it. And not only that, I'm not afraid of the Wombles. I'm not ashamed of them. One of the first, in fact, the very first release on my little Dramatico record label, which I still run and which Katy is still on, was a compilation of Womble tracks. So I haven't got any fear of Wombles. I haven't got Womble phobia. All right, we'll take your version of Closest Thing to Crazy, which is just an incredible song. Congratulations. I mean, for me, it is
just the most incredible song. I think it's beautiful. Let's take a listen to Mike Batt's version.
Thank you very much.
We're back with our remaining moments with Mike Batt. That's the closest thing to Crazy, your version. It's interesting, isn't it, how you did exactly the same thing that Katy did. Yours didn't go over here. Hers has become one of the greatest songs ever. There's no reason or rhyme to music, is there? It's hitting the right time. And Katy did seem to do that when you launched her. She was there at the right time. We were so sick of the girl groups and the boy bands. And you found somebody with talent who could play and sing. And that's what people were looking for.
Yeah.
Timing is important in music, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course she brings something to the song, which is what she is. She's made it her own. And of course, before that, and I think I give it my own, it's the writer. I have my own feelings, and of course it's my own as well in a different way. I think also I have to be practical about this. When I wrote this and recorded it, I had a record company who were a major record company who couldn't, frankly, give a monkeys whether I had a hit or not. They didn't even put it out. So you can't get much less interested than not putting a record out. With Katy, she had a small independent record label, which is my record label, who had no other artist. They had one ambition in life, and everything that record company did, which was me and 2 secretaries and a sound engineer. Every time we got up in the morning, it was, how can we break Katy? How can we break Katy? What should we do? Well, how can we maneuver past this brick wall called not getting any radio play, or this brick wall called not getting her on television? What can we do? And every time we tried to tunnel under that wall or go around it or over it, we managed to get a little bit further. And so a lot of it is to do with effort, but ultimately it comes down to whether it's a good record or not. And in fact, Katy made it into a hit, and power to her elbow, because that is exactly what an artist, a great artist, can do to what I'd like to think was a good song.
Very finally, some silly questions. The song that you wish you'd have written, is there one song that you think is just amazing?
I wish I'd written Waterloo Sunset. It's just one of those great, great songs. Ray Davies is one of those great, great songwriters. In fact, somebody once said to me that Ray Davies was the Roy Orbison of England. I wouldn't say that myself. I'm a great admirer of Roy Orbison. I think he's fantastic. He had a wonderful, poignant way of both singing and pouring his heart out in a song. And if you ask me who's a genius, in music, I'd put Roy Orbison up as certainly a contender for that very overused title. But Waterloo Sunset is just a great song. I wouldn't think it's that personal a song. I think, I don't know how personal all Ray Davies' songs are. I think sometimes he's a bit like me in that he'll write a song that's almost like a stage play scenario, and think of the Terry and Julie idea, for example. People said, was it Terence Stamp and Julie Christie? And he said, no, it was friends of his. And so what? It doesn't really matter, but the atmosphere of the record is just fantastic, and it's just a great song.
I was very lucky to be invited to one of your showcases with Katy for the last album, and she sung live, which was just brilliant. And I noticed in the video that you seem to record everything in your front room. If you're not in control of it, the more people you hand stuff out to, the more they can cock it up.
Well, that is true. I think you can be a control person professionally without being a control person in your private life, and I think that's what I strive to be, because it's rather like saying and I hate the word control freak, because what does freak mean? I mean, if you're a driver and you're driving down the road, just the fact that you want to be in control of that vehicle, does that mean you're a freak? No. So it's the same with your career, and it's the same with a song, it's the same with a film. Someone has to be the director. It doesn't mean to say that you become a control freak with all the people around you, but you do want to put as much of yourself into if it's an artistic thing, into the artistic thing, or in your case a radio program, which is again an artistic thing, but it's got a different angle. If someone's writing a newspaper piece, and I nearly said a newspaper pace, I didn't. Well, in fact, I have now, so you can edit it any way you like. But whatever you're doing, you want to be in control of it. As I say, I think that becomes a problem if you become a control freak in your private life, because then that affects people around you, and you can become quite unpleasant.
congratulations on being you. Congratulations on the new album. It's in the stores now. It is remarkable to hear how many songs have affected so many parts of our lives. And that must be great for you to look back on a career that is so colourful, yet you've still got a career that's very flowery and present and here today.
I haven't heard my career described as flowery very often, but perhaps if I'd been
come on, you were the man behind the Wombles. I mean, you have to be flowery.
Okay, well, perhaps if I'd been a baker, you could have said my career was flowery. No, but I have had a very colourful life. Yeah, you're right, and lots of downs as well as ups, which makes you appreciate the ups. And it is a roller coaster. It's a bit of a cliche to say that, but I've crashed and burned on several occasions, and I'm talking about big style. I'm talking about losing everything nearly. But you never lose everything. I was nearly killed in a car crash 5 years ago. I've had a West End theatre show that really did nearly take me down with it, and so I've had some very bad times, but I've had some great times as well. And quite honestly, you wouldn't want it any other. I wouldn't want it to be different. I wouldn't. If you ask me would I want to change anything about my life, no. I'm cruising along, and I'm doing whatever comes along. I'm a little bit too busy at the moment. I'd like to prune a few things out of this year if I can, but I sat down the other day with the people that I work with, and we tried to prune something out, and there was nothing this year that I could possibly live without. So I'm afraid I'm just going to have to be a bit too busy.
It's a great place to be. I was saying to somebody the other day, if I had to give everything away in my life and could keep just one thing, it would be my piano. And I don't know about you, but at those bad times, at those awful times, at those tragic times, it's the one thing that always gets me through.
Yeah, could there be a girl sitting on top of the piano, though?
So this Katie Melua thing, what is the chances of you getting me a date with Katie? Come on, Mike, you're her manager, you virtually own her.
Well, I haven't got her diary with me, but I shall go back to the office and see what I can do.
I'm free all the time. I haven't got anything else in my diary.
I do not believe that.
Mike Batt, congratulations on the new album. We'll end with A Winter's Tale, which is just beautiful. And thank God that gets played every December.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks very much for having me, as it were.